So we're going to chat today about whether it's MLOps or machine learning ops, to give it its full name. So can you perhaps start by just giving us a bit of an outline as to what exactly MLOps is?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, in a short version, MLOps is a set of best practices that aims to deploy and maintain machine learning models in production. And of course, do that in a reliable and efficient way. And one might ask, like, isn't a model like the same as just traditional software? Haven't we solved that problem of like deploying and maintaining software? But machine learning models are a bit of a different nature than traditional software. There's some similarities, of course. It's still code running somewhere. However, if you think about it, a model is kind of representing how the world looked like in the past in order to predict the future. So, but if the world changes, it could be that you're trying to predict the revenue in a store, you're running a business with several stores. Then if your competitor opens up a store next door and your model was not trained on that, then suddenly it's not really a good representation anymore for how the world looks like, and it will start to degrade over time. And that's kind of one of the things that MLOps is trying to address, because models are a different nature than traditional software. So you need a new set of metrics and a new way of maintaining your models as well.
Okay, and before we go sort of delve a bit deeper into the MLOps, there are a lot of ops out there in the landscape. Yeah, everything from DevOps, NetOps, AIOps, DevSecOps. I could go on, but can you perhaps just put MLOps within that context? I mean, is it just a coincidence that it's a different type of ops, or is there any sort of synergy between any of these others?
I think many of these different ops tie back to DevOps. So NetOps is essentially applying DevOps practices just to network operations. And likewise, MLOps is also applying DevOps practices just to machine learning operations. So it's essentially applying some of the same practices when you look after machine learning models in production. So being able to deploy, being able to maintain, but again, as we can't apply DevOps just as straight as we do with software development, there's some specialties around machine learning models that, as I alluded to before, they can degrade over time. You basically need to be able to retrain them if the world changes around you, which you don't really need for traditional applications. So that's essentially MLOps in short is like DevOps for machine learning and AI.
Okay, and I guess the next obvious question is why does it matter? What benefits can it bring to the enterprise who embarks or embraces MLOps?
I think many companies who has started their AI journey has spent the first time kind of experimenting and building machine learning models. But once you reach the point where you can move those models into production, that's where you can kind of get the value from machine learning models, right? So before you kind of reach that point and can close that gap between your experimental phase and actually getting something running in production, you won't really be able to get any value from your machine learning model. So that's the first kind of real benefit that MLOps help with enterprises, is that hey, you can get stuff into production now in a controlled and scalable way, and can start getting the value from your investment in actually building the model. Then I think another key component is that once you have machine learning models in production, it's not by default that they will just start to be adopted. I mean, let's say you have a machine learning model where you're helping people make decisions by having a model coming with its prediction of what's going to happen. But if you don't trust that prediction in the first place, as a human, you're just going to continue as you used to in the old world and make your decisions on however you've done that in the past. So in order to trust a machine learning model, and that's what MLOps bring as well, you need to be sure that it's accurate. You need to be able to explain what a machine learning model is doing while it's in production. So these are some of the other benefits that you get from MLOps as a practice. So I think in summary, I mean, why does it matter to enterprises? I mean, every company that is kind of seeking to unlock the value of AI by moving things into production, they will get the benefit of MLOps by getting monitoring, trust, and governance in place for your machine learning models.
And in terms of, bear in mind, it's a newish discipline. Is there an obvious place that it should live within an organization? You know, is there a particular department that should own it, or does it go across, you know, is it one of these new collaboration sort of initiatives so everyone has to own it? Or, yeah, who sort of should be in charge of MLOps, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think a lot of companies are also kind of exploring that, where it should live and what the best solution is there, because it is indeed like many different personas that will engage as part of MLOps, because it comes all the way from developing models to actually monitoring and maintaining them in production. And you will see data scientists, you will see data engineers, you will see machine learning engineers, you'll see DevOps people, IT ops people, and even like model risk management people who are to approve whether a new model can go into production or not. So essentially, it lives across many different roles. But my advice has always been to kind of try and establish like a center of excellence within an organization for MLOps to help facilitate it, because it's basically down to introducing some process, some technology that people can use in order to be successful with their AI journey. And that expertise could be anchored in a center of excellence within your business.
And in terms of like where it fits best, I mean, are there certain industries that MLOps is more relevant to? Is it relevant to sort of all companies across all sectors? And I'm also thinking maybe I mean, we tend to think of these new AI technologies being driven by the large enterprises and then maybe filtering down to SMEs. I guess, yeah, how would you characterize where it sits best? You know, who can make best use of it, you know, in the short term, etc.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's critical to all organizations that is looking to get the value from AI, right? So, but of course, there are certain industries that are a bit further ahead in their AI journey than others, and especially some of the large enterprises in finance and insurance has been using AI for a while. But if we think about who it's relevant for, I mean, I think the paradigm that we're seeing right now is that we had the digital transformation where suddenly, I mean, every company would have some kind of software, right? It's very hard to find a company today that doesn't have any piece of software, right? And I think over time, the same thing you'll see is that every application will have some kind of AI built into it. It doesn't have that today, but that's definitely what we will see in the future. And that's why it makes it relevant to all organizations. And also because you see many companies have spent a lot of time, maybe like several years in the experimental phase, trying to build models. But one of the biggest hurdles for them is actually to get stuff into production. So starting early on your MLOps rollout, so to say, is crucial as well for companies to be successful. So that's why even if you're quite early in your AI journey as a company, I still think it's relevant for you to focus on that gap between the experimental phase and actually getting the value in production.
Okay, and maybe if we can move on to DataRobot as a company, just a bit of background on how you got into the MLOps space. I think I remember you years ago as more of a storage networking vendor maybe, but obviously with some intelligence in that. But just a bit about the journey that's led the company into the MLOps space.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, DataRobot started in the category of AutoML, which is essentially looking at speeding up the development of machine learning models, whether you're a data scientist or non-data scientist. We have kind of built out an advanced platform that can help you create models much faster and more precise. But then being able to do that, we also quickly saw a need to actually deploy those models once they were ready to go into production. And of course, we built out our platform to cover the MLOps part as well of deploying models. Then after that, we kind of got approached by a lot of customers as well, who say, well, it's fine that I can go and deploy the models that I've created with DataRobot, but I also have models that I've created outside DataRobot, something that I've been writing in Python or R, and can you help deploy and maintain and monitor those as well? So that was back in 2019, where we introduced MLOps as a key component as part of our platform, and essentially made it available for any model that you have out there to bring that in and monitor and deploy and maintain it within DataRobot MLOps. And now, I mean, looking at the future, I don't know if you saw the recent announcement that we had, but we just acquired a company called Algorithmia. I mean, that is kind of like the latest history in the journey here, that we are bringing in a very strong player in the MLOps space to further enhance our capabilities. And one of the things that we will be adding in addition is the capability to also run and serve models on GPUs, which is often used for neural networks and deep learning models.
In terms of the company DataRobot, how would you position yourselves in the MLOps market? You know, what's your approach? How does it differ, or is similar to, you know, other vendors in the space?
Yeah, so we kind of see three main categories out there. So there's like the end-to-end platform vendors, where we are one of them. Then there's vendors focusing purely on MLOps. And then I guess the third category, I would say, like homegrown solutions, where you kind of stitching things together from either open source or things that you can find from the cloud vendors. And I mean, being an end-to-end vendor, I mean, DataRobot has a platform where we can not only look after the MLOps piece, which is deploying and monitoring and managing, but once we detect in production that, hey, your model needs to be retrained because it's not accurate anymore, I mean, the end-to-end platform actually allows you to go back in the development phase as an automated job and actually retrain your model and bring in the newest version of it in order to address that situation that just occurred in production. So that's like one of the real strengths that we see the end-to-end platform giving. And then I think a few other core strengths that I would like to emphasize is, of course, what we talked about, that you can bring in any model and deploy it on any infrastructure of your choice. So just because you're using an end-to-end platform, you don't have to develop it within DataRobot, you don't have to deploy it on DataRobot. You have your freedom of choice there on where you want to develop and run your models. And then another key thing that we've been investing heavily in is what we call the Challenger framework. So you need to think about this as, hey, I have a machine learning model running in production, but I would love to compare that to other models and see would they have done a better job on the same predictions that they are receiving. So we can basically add challenger models that will receive the same input, and you can compare and see, hey, would I be better off switching to one of the competitors' challenger models instead of the ones that I'm running in production right now? And then a last thing to emphasize is that AI and machine learning, I mean, we see more and more regulations coming in as well in terms of being able to explain and have an audit trail of what happened. So the whole governance workflow is built into the platform as well. So whenever you want to release a new version or change the model that is running right now, I mean, we have workflows that can kick in. So you will need to go through certain approval steps in order to release a new version. And that is, of course, all documented in terms of history and audit trail. So these are some of our core strengths in the platform.
Okay, and the platform has, if I understand correctly, basically 4 pillars. I mean, I think you've covered some of it in you know, what you've just said, but we've got deployment, monitoring, lifecycle management, and government. So, you know, without necessarily repeating yourself, can you just give us a little bit of outline of those four sort of areas?
Sure. Yeah. So deployment is kind of addressing the the issue of taking something from like a data scientist that they've been developing and getting it into production in a controlled way. And the reason why it's really important is that we have seen that, I mean, IT is on one hand and data scientists is on the other hand, and they're not really used to working closely together as software development and IT has done for many, many years. And it's a different tool set that data scientists will typically use. So if they come with a model they have been writing in R or Python, I mean, essentially, it's not something that is typically packaged up in a way that IT can just go and deploy that. Also because it's not really typically an expertise of a data scientist. There's for sure some out there that knows how to do it, but many will use notebooks or experimental tools to kind of create their models. But once you need to have that running in production, you want to encapsulate that in a enterprise-ready APIs, or other applications can consume it and so on. And that's what we help with deployment. We're basically being able to take whatever the data scientist has been building and then packaging it up in an enterprise-ready way with built-in monitoring and governance, so IT can go and deploy that as they would deploy any other application. Then the managed part in terms of managing models, I mean, the whole life cycle around a model, you need to have these workflows to approve whenever there's a change happening, but you also need to be able to easily swap a model to another model if there's a newer one that is doing a better job. And you want to do that without any service interruptions and so on, right? So again, that's something that we have in the platform. So because we encapsulate your machine learning models in a nice API, we can also easily swap the underlying model without you having to do anything in terms of changing like how your applications consume that model. Then the governance, of course, the way to look at how has this model changed over time, who has made the change, who has requested the change, which version of it is it. I mean, basically being able to see the audit trail of what has happened and have a model registry of your current and previous versions of whatever you have built and deployed in the past. And then the monitoring piece, which is really important as well. You could say, why can't I just monitor my machine learning model with traditional monitoring software? But there's a new set of metrics that you need to look at because these models can degrade over time. So one example of that is accuracy. I mean, we rarely talk about accuracy when we look at traditional applications, but I mean, if your model has predicted something and what actually happened in the real world is something completely different, you want to understand that and be able to react to that. So if it starts to behave really poorly, that you can do something about it. And likewise, there is the concept of something called data drift. It basically means that you have trained your model on a certain data set. I mean, that was how the world looked like by then. A good example is that we just had like a COVID hit and the world changed massively. I mean, it could also be something less severe, right? But data drift can help you discover that, hey, suddenly I'm getting a lot of requests for this model that I want to predict certain things that has changed entirely from what we have changed the model on. And therefore, it's an early indication that, hey, I need to do something about it.
Okay, and in terms of, it might seem a bit premature as we're sort of talking about MLOps as a fairly new idea, but in terms of the future of the market, what sort of things do you anticipate in terms of the take up? I mean, is it relatively early days in terms of use at the moment? And also, I mean, are there more sort of technical attributes that you can see would be good to add to an MLOps solution to make it even more useful to an organization?
Yeah, I think, I mean, although in some ways you can say it's early days, but we're also seeing a massive uptake in the market right now. And the analyst out there is also calling that out in terms of the market size. So there's some interesting numbers there in how big it can actually be in the future. I think for the solutions out there, I think definitely we will see an increased focus on the governance and control and trust aspects. You see that, for instance, the EU has started to look into regulations on machine learning and AI as well. And there can be some heavy fines involved as well if you don't live up to those regulations. So that is of course a concern for businesses being able to actually document what has happened to a certain machine learning model and why is it making certain predictions, right? So I think there will be a huge focus in that area as well in the future of the solutions being out there.
And is that, just to clarify, is that sort of a data protection governance, or I know I've read various articles about the ethics of AI, if you like, what's permissible to do, and there's sort of AI bias, and all that stuff. Are we talking of both those sort of areas, both sort of data protection and the sort of ethics of using the information?
Especially to your last point around the ethics as well, and being able to discover whether a model is biased towards something, right? So, I mean, there's been some really devastating examples as well of models producing like poor results, right? And also think like that's also why you see in reaction right now in terms of regulations that, hey, we need to be able to trust these models and make sure that they are not treating people in an unfair way, and we don't have bias in them, right? So that is the main thing that you'll probably see many solutions addressing as well, because you need also a fast way and an easy way to kind of get to those conclusions and being able to show that to regulators. It can't be a study that you have to work on for many months in order to prove that your model, how your model is running and what it's doing, right? Yeah.
And in terms of that future, I mean, more specifically around DataRobot, I think you alluded earlier to the acquisition of Algorithmia, but you've also had I think it's a $300 million series of I think Series G funding. So those two things are, what other things can we expect from a DataRobot in the MLOps space?
Yes, I mean, it's very exciting times, and I mean, we'll definitely continue our focus to being the leader in the MLOps space as we've been so far, and basically being able to have you bring in any model and run it anywhere on the infrastructure as you like, and then get the benefits of MLOps. And I think like Algorithmia, with the announcement that we just came out with there, it lines perfectly up with that vision, and it kind of adds a new dimension as well to our story, and being able to serve models with much more complex payloads, and also, as I said before, being able to run workloads and GPUs for deep learning models as well. So yeah, we're definitely putting in a lot of investment and focus on MLOps in order to continue to be the leader. And some of those things that we spoke just about around bias and fairness and trust and governance, that's definitely an area that we are looking to improve and enhance as well further.
Okay, and maybe as we conclude, for folks that are looking at MLOps either in the early days, or they've maybe had a go and perhaps been slightly disappointed in what results they've achieved, are there one or two bits of advice you can give? And I'm thinking, for example, I think I asked earlier about where it best fits. Maybe the Network Operations Center has a role to play in MLOps. So yeah, just some thoughts, I guess, to help people in the early part of their MLOps journey.
Sure. I mean, the easy answer is to go and look at DataRobot, right? So, so I think, I mean, with every change, I think it's good to kind of look at the three pillars: people, process, and technology, right? So, I mean, you need people who, with the help of technology, can implement processes that will solve for a specific business need, right? And with MLOps, as we talked about, there's different people and processes involved in MLOps. And just because we're talking machine learning models, it shouldn't always land on the table of the data scientist, right? Because, I mean, building the model is a single component of an entire life cycle for a machine learning model, right? So to your example, if we look at the NOC or IT operations in general, I mean, they already have a widely established practice within the company looking after the most critical applications, infrastructure components, network, and so on. And I don't see why machine learning monitoring couldn't be a key part of IT operations to look after, and basically being able to escalate as well to the right team when things starts to degrade. So if a model is having problems because of the underlying infrastructure, well, I mean, IT operations is already looking after that and can escalate to the infrastructure team, right? But if the model is having problems because of some data science issue, then I mean, IT operations should be empowered to escalate to the data science group for them to look into the model itself and see what can be done in order to mitigate the issues. So I definitely think there's really not a need to kind of have data scientists look and monitor models ongoingly. I mean, we have a well-established practice there in IT operations, and it's already tied into like event management and the other processes that is in there already. And then I think, I mean, in terms of like if you're looking at starting your journey with MLOps and or have started and have hit some obstacles in that journey, the thing around creating a center of excellence as the heart around those processes and technologies that you need within your organization in order to solve for the need, I think it's really good to kind of anchor it in a center of excellence and have a standardized way of onboarding models wherever they are made within your company and bring them in a standardized way through MLOps.
And is it right that you start with maybe one application, one project, and then as that works, you start rolling out MLOps across, or are you able to say, right, you know, as of today or tomorrow, you know, the whole organization is going to be driven, or, you know, at least MLOps is going to be a critical part? How do you sort of introduce MLOps, I guess, into an organization?
Yeah, I think you have definitely seen companies starting out small and basically taking like a manual approach to every single like model that they have developed. So they've kind of gone and built that API layer around the model themselves. They have like manually moved it into production together with IT and so on. The problem there is that it's a bespoke solution every time, and it's not really giving you the standards that you can use in order to scale. So I mean, I would strongly advise anyone to kind of look into establishing some kind of MLOps practice. Think about it as a bit like a landing zone where if you're a data scientist, you created a model, you can drop your model into the landing zone, and from there on, it's moved into production in a standardized and governed way. Then you can, of course, always think about, do I need challenger models from day one? Do I need other aspects of MLOps from day one? But basically, being able to deploy in the same and standardized way is really key, because else you will have to maintain these bespoke solutions and build them out every time, and that's just a lot of time and effort lost in that.
Okay, well, it's been really, really enjoyable to chat to you today, Asger. So thanks very much indeed for your time. Thank you.
Likewise, thank you, Phil.